Over the Way, the first chapter of A House to Let. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. A House to Let by Charles Dickens, Wilkie Collins, Elizabeth Gaskell, Adelaide Ann Proctor. Over the Way. I had been living at Tunbridge Wells and nowhere else, going on for 10 years, when my medical man, very clever in his profession and the prettiest player I ever saw in my life of a hand at long whist, which was a noble and princely game before short was heard of, said to me one day, as he sat feeling my pulse on the actual sofa which my poor dear sister Jane worked before her spine came on and laid her on a board for 15 months at a stretch, the most upright woman that ever lived, said to me, "What we want, ma'am, is a Philip." "Good goodness gracious, Dr. Towers," says I, quite startled at the man, for he was so christened himself. "Don't talk as if you were alluding to people's names, but say what you mean." "I mean, dear ma'am, that we want a little change of air and scene." "Bless the man," said I, "does he mean we or me?" "I mean you, ma'am." "Then Lord forgive you, Dr. Towers," I said, "why don't you get into a habit of expressing yourself in a straightforward manner, like a loyal subject of our gracious Queen Victoria, and a member of the Church of England?" Towers laughed, as he generally does when he has fidgeted me into any of my impatient ways, one of my states, as I call them, and then he began, "Tone, ma'am, tone is all you require." He appealed to Trottle, who just then came in with the coal scuttle, looking, in his nice black suit, like an amiable man putting on coals from motives of benevolence. Trottle, whom I always call my right hand, has been in my service 32 years. He entered my service far away from England. He is the best of creatures, and the most respectable of men, but opinionated. "What you want, ma'am," says Trottle, making up the fire in his quiet and skilful way, "is tone." "Lord forgive you both," says I, bursting out a-laughing. "I see you are in a conspiracy against me, so I suppose you must do what you like with me, and take me to London for a change." For some weeks Towers had hinted at London, and consequently I was prepared for him. When we had got to this point, we got on so expeditiously that Trottle was packed off to London next day but one, to find some sort of place for me to lay my troublesome old head in. Trottle came back to me at the Wells after 2 days' absence, with accounts of a charming place that could be taken for 6 months certain, with liberty to renew on the same terms for another 6, and which really did afford every accommodation that I wanted. "Could you really find no fault at all in the rooms, Trottle?" I asked him. "Not a single one, ma'am. They are exactly suitable to you. There is not a fault in them. There is but one fault outside of them." "And what's that?" "They are opposite a House to Let." "Oh," I said, considering of it. "But is that such a very great objection?" "I think it my duty to mention it, ma'am. It is a dull object to look at. Otherwise I was so greatly pleased with the lodging that I should have closed with the terms at once, as I had your authority to do." Trottle thinking so highly of the place in my interest, I wished not to disappoint him. Consequently, I said, "The empty house may let, perhaps." "Oh dear no, ma'am," said Trottle, shaking his head with decision. "It won't let. It never does let, ma'am." "Mercy me! Why not?" "Nobody knows, ma'am. All I have to mention is, ma'am, that the house won't let." "How long has this unfortunate house been to let in the name of fortune?" said I. "Ever so long," said Trottle. "Years." "Is it in ruins?" "It's a good deal out of repair, ma'am, but it's not in ruins." The long and the short of this business was, that next day I had a pair of post horses put to my chariot, for I never travel by railway. Not that I have anything to say against railways, except that they came in when I was too old to take to them, and that they made ducks and drakes of a few turnpike bonds I had. And so I went up myself with Trottle in the rumble to look at the inside of this same lodging, and at the outside of this same house. As I say, I went and saw for myself. The lodging was perfect. That I was sure it would be, because Trottle is the best judge of comfort I know. The empty house was an eyesore, and that I was sure it would be too, for the same reason. However, setting the one thing against the other, the good against the bad, the lodging very soon got the victory over the house. My lawyer, Mr. Squares, of Crown Office Road, Temple, drew up an agreement, which his young man jabbered over so dreadfully when he read it to me, that I didn't understand one word of it except my own name, and hardly that. And I signed it, and the other party signed it, and in 3 weeks' time I moved my old bones, bag and baggage, up to London. For the first month or so I arranged to leave Trottle at the Wells. I made this arrangement, not only because there was a good deal to take care of in the way of my school children and pensioners, and also of a new stove in the hall, to air the house in my absence, which appeared to me calculated to blow up and burst, but likewise because I suspect Trottle, though the steadiest of men, and a widower between 60 and 70, to be what I call rather a philanderer. I mean that when any friend comes down to see me and brings a maid, Trottle is always remarkably ready to show that maid the Wells of an evening, and that I have more than once noticed the shadow of his arm, outside the room door nearly opposite my chair, encircling that maid's waist on the landing, like a tablecloth brush. Therefore I thought it just as well, before any London philandering took place, that I should have a little time to look round me, and to see what girls were in and about the place. So nobody stayed with me in my new lodging at first, after Trottle had established me there safe and sound, but Peggy Flobbins, my maid, a most affectionate and attached woman, who never was an object of philandering since I have known her, and is not likely to begin to become so after 29 years next March. It was the 5th of November when I first breakfasted in my new rooms. The guys were going about in the brown fog, like magnified monsters of insects in table beer, and there was a guy resting on the doorsteps of the house to let. I put on my glasses, partly to see how the boys were pleased with what I sent them out by Peggy, and partly to make sure that she didn't approach too near the ridiculous object, which of course was full of sky-rockets, and might go off into bangs at any moment. In this way it happened that the first time I ever looked at the house to let, after I became its opposite neighbour, I had my glasses on. And this might not have happened once in 50 times, for my sight is uncommonly good for my time of life, and I wear glasses as little as I can, for fear of spoiling it. I knew already that it was a 10-roomed house, very dirty and much dilapidated, that the area rails were rusty and peeling away, and that 2 or 3 of them were wanting, or half wanting, that there were broken panes of glass in the windows, and blotches of mud on other panes, which the boys had thrown at them, that there